Ken James and Jason McKittrick. Brought to you by Cryptocurium.
In my tortured ears, there sounds unceasingly a nightmare, whirring and flapping, and a faint, distant baying, as of some gigantic hound. It is not a dream. It is not, I fear, even madness, for too much has already happened to give me these merciful doubts. St. is a mangled corpse. I alone know why, and such is my knowledge that I'm about to blow out my brains for fear I shall be mangled in the same way. Down unlit and illimitable corridors of eldritch fantasy sweeps the black, shapeless nemesis that drives me to self-annihilation.
And we're back. Welcome back to Learning Lovecraft. I am your host, Jason McKittrick, and as always, the traveler of the Eldritch Path, joining us tonight, Mr. Ken James.
Good evening, folks.
Thank you all for standing by as we went on our little hiatus. We had some stuff to take care of, and between our other podcast and, basically general life stuff, we kind of just needed a break. So you just heard the opening paragraph of H.P. Lovecraft's The Hound, the subject of tonight's episode. And tonight, we are joined by a guest to the podcast once again. Thespian, actor, man of the stage and screen, and master of the one-man adaptation, Mr. Greg Oliver Bodine. Welcome, Greg.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Wanted to get you on here since the beginning. I even said to myself, I was like, when you get to the Hound, we got to bring Greg on. So, Greg, you have a personal relationship, I would say, with this particular story. Would you mind telling the folks listening about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my introduction, The Hound was really kind of my introduction to H.P. Lovecraft. The Hound, ironically, is the most Poe-like of all of his stories. And as you know, for the last, 15, 20 years, I've been doing a solo performance adapted from two Edgar Allan Poe short stories, the Cask of Amontillado and the Black Cat. So, yeah.
Amazing, by the way.
What's that?
Amazing, by the way.
Oh, thank you. So, that was really sort of my introduction to Lovecraft. The Hound obviously is more. I would say it's more. It's written more in the classic horror genre
right.
than what Lovecraft was really known for, which is cosmic horror. But so I started adapting The Hound, I think, in 2010, and I did it as part of an evening of H.P. Lovecraft performances way back in 2011, and then I had an opportunity to do it again, to remount it as part of the 2019 Capitol Fringe Festival here in Washington, D.C.
Right. What was the reasoning behind choosing The Hound?
Well, like I said, I'm a huge admirer of Edgar Allan Poe, and I don't know. I kind of feel like the Hound is the redheaded stepchild of a lot of the Lovecraft stories.
Fair enough.
I would imagine that you wanted to work on your craft. You never got to play a dog before, so this was like the perfect opportunity. No,
right. Well, and with the help of some awesome sound design, yes, of course. But I was just looking at my Lovecraft Bible. It's I'm sure you're familiar with this, Jason. It's the new annotated H.P. Lovecraft by Leslie Klinger.
Oh yeah, yep. I've got the 3 editions.
And yeah, exactly. And I was just so I was going over that again yesterday, and there's a nice little introduction that Leslie Klinger writes about. But anyway, he quotes a very well-known and respected Lovecraft academic, S.T. Joshi.
Oh yeah, we talk about the Josh Man quite a bit on this podcast.
The Josh Man is a staple over here. So
anyway, he was, Joshi was quoted as saying, the Hound is, and I quote, roundly abused for being wildly overwritten. And his view is that is that Lovecraft wrote it as a parody, a deliberate parody. You know, obviously I'm I'm not a Lovecraft scholar, but I don't know. I don't entirely disagree with that. And correct me if I'm wrong. I think in some of his correspondences, Lovecraft was kind of notorious for sort of poo-pooing, you know, some of his earlier writing, because it just, you know, I think he was still growing as a writer. You know, coming at, you know, what Dagon was that his first story, 1917? What was his first story?
Yeah, The Tomb is largely credited as his first quote unquote adult story,
Right.
but Dagon is second. But it's kind of, I think we went over this in the podcast quite a bit, where it's like those first handful of stories basically inform the rest of his stories. Like, he comes back to those sets again and again. Like, you have the monster from the sea, you have the you know, the weird doctor, or the weird you know, cemetery.
Well, this story, it's funny to hear that this one being called overwritten, because we've gotten to points, and once again, I'm early on in my journey here. I'm getting there, but there's some stuff that is just like written and spun and talked about. Like the Hound, I was like, no, it's pretty to the point. I mean, we, you know, like I usually do at the beginning of the episodes, you go and you got, you know, you have your guy who's into weird stuff, his buddy that, you know, isn't as good or isn't as weird.
Unnamed narrator.
Unnamed narrator. And largely in the beginning of this one, we actually hear, oh, I'm going to blow my brains out. So at that point, I thought everything was a little more direct than overwritten.
Yeah, I mean, because he certainly, there's that famous quote, right? We did it in a recent episode where he says, you know, I have my Dunsany pieces, I have my Poe pieces, but where are my Lovecraft pieces? And he's still looking for his voice.
And overwritten, I would say all the Dunsany pieces, as far as I'm concerned, are overwritten. Like,
they certainly are. I think that Lovecraft gets criticism for the story because it's so unabashedly Poe, but I love it. I love this story.
I love it too.
One last thing I'll say, I just think that was a hot take from the Josh man. You know, that this is overridden.
He is Mr. Hot Take, and we love him. I find myself often disagreeing with some of his takes on stories, and it's like, well, is it? I mean, because sometimes Lovecraft does go into self-parody, but then by the time you get to the end of the story, he's like settled into it. He's like he's pulling out all the stops. He's making it. You know, it's a great story, and I was going to save it for the end, but I'll just say it now. This story is entertaining. It does what it's supposed to be. It does what it's supposed to do.
I absolutely agree, and that's why I wanted to adapt it as a one-man show.
Yeah, because it's pure mood, right?
It's pure mood, and I think the main character, if I'm allowed to talk about him at this point.
No, go ahead. I'm just kidding.
So he's you know, like in a lot of Lovecraft stories, he doesn't really have a name. He's just it's in the first, told in the first person, and he's sort of the nameless narrator. But I think it's pretty safe to assume that you know, through the course of the story, you know, he describes the various movements, artistic movements that he and St. John are following. You know, they talk about the symbolists and the pre-Raphaelites and the decadents. And I really think that the narrator and St. John definitely fall into, you know, that last school of aesthetic thought in terms of you know, what does he talk about? I'm not going to quote the story because it's just not it's not sort of at my fingertips. But anyway, I think it's absolutely natural for him to be using all of these really purple descriptors. You know, I mean, it's absolutely consistent. You know, with the movement that he is that he's in love with.
Absolutely, the criticism that it's overwritten or overwrought or too purple, I think kind of misses the point that using this kind of language puts you in that proper mood. So it's like, why wouldn't he? I mean, it's, you know, and if he's going to go for it, he might as well go for it, because when he's describing some of these scenes, you know, the moon and the way that the branches almost drip and the bats and all of it, it's like a Frazetta cover just come to life. It's just so good.
And before we move on, Greg, as you said about the unnamed narrator, we do a little thing here too, where we like to assign a name to each unnamed narrator. So at any point, if at the precipice of your mind's eye there is a name that comes to mind, feel free to assign it to our narrator.
I can do that right now.
Oh shoot!
I decided to name the character that I played in my solo show, Reed Farnsworth.
There it is, Reed.
Reed.
Going forward, we will refer to the narrator's Reed.
You're all right with it?
Perfect. No, sounds good, because it gets tiresome when we're sitting here and going through the stories. Like, so the unnamed narrator. So we just came up with, I don't know, a few episodes ago that we were just decided, we're going to give it a name. So there we go. We have Reed and St. John. So, all right. So before we dive in, little particulars like we always like to do. The Hound was written in September of 1922 and then published in the February 1924 issue of Weird Tales. This is one of his big publishings of Weird Tales, and this was quite a thing for him. I was asking Greg before we started recording a question about the pronunciation of the character. It's written as St. John, but in the local vernacular, it would have been pronounced St. John.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
That's how the British would say it.
Right. Greg's the expert. It's St. John. You hear that, Joshi? Just kidding. So we start off with this Reed, our unnamed narrator, now named. He's contemplating suicide after being driven insane by these events that have occurred.
He's gonna blow his brains out.
He sure is. And the language right off the top that you just heard in the beginning, he starts off right away. And it's so indicative of the Lovecraft style, but you gotta love the last line of the down, unlit, and illimitable corridors of eldritch fantasy sweeps the black, shapeless nemesis that drives me to self-annihilation. It's like, we're ready, we're buckled in.
Right, and how when I start reading these, I always kind of okay, because like I said, he get his descriptors are usually so descriptive. They rack they rack your brain to kind of flesh out what he's saying, and at that time you're like, how do you write like a feeling or it's wild.
Yeah.
So here we are again.
Yep. Ken is coming along the path.
What I find particularly interesting and even amusing is that at the very beginning of the story, he seems to have found God. Right?
Yeah, kind of.
Right.
Because he's about to be
Meeting him.
he thinks he's about to be killed by the same creature that killed St. John. But in the next paragraph, he says, "May heaven forgive the folly and morbidity which led us both to so monstrous a fate." He's like, oh shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have these two. I would call them two aesthetes, right? They really, they savor the flavor, right? I mean, they're really into the beauty of things, but they have this ghoulish preoccupation with things, right? Like Greg mentioned earlier, they've been through all the things that you would go through if you're trying to get into this, really, ghoulish stuff. They've been through all the decadent pastimes, but their interest in each only lasts for so long, right? And when we join them, he's already talking about how they've constantly defiled these crypts, and they often keep these souvenirs from these expeditions they go out on at night. And since they reside in the same house, they have this opportunity to set up sort of this museum for their own pleasure of all these artifacts that's collected from all these tombs that they've plundered. Tombs, crypts, catacombs.
I was thinking at the beginning point of this, I was I was drawing a correlation in my own head to Reanimator. Okay. And I was like, these guys were like the hobbyist, non-scientist version of Herbert West and whatever we named him, his buddy.
It was like Mike. We
Mike
were just
something, but it was maybe Kyle. But it was these are like hobbyists that are enjoying the ghoul work as opposed to it being a means to the end to get the specimen.
Right. So, I think they're both very similar because you have those guys were the other side of the coin. They were the science way. These guys are clearly wealthy. Yeah. They can do as they please, and they're just bored.
That's what I was. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like at the beginning, it's like these are like the almost layman version of like curiosity hunters, but they're so bored that it's turned to like oh, we got these rotted bodies and artifacts that we've collected from the ground. Yeah. But it just that parallel. I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
Howard's into some stuff at this point. His mind has traveled in.
Sure.
At this juncture, he's been thinking about the grave a lot. You know?
Oh, yeah. You think?
Yeah.
This collection consists of, they've got headstones, they've got bodies, mummies, skulls. Then they talk about that there's these several heads in different phases of decomposition. It also includes statues, paintings, other pieces of art, and then there's this locked portfolio bound in tanned human skin that is purported to contain artwork by Goya, which is a great little shout out to his black paintings. So we get this next quote.
Our museum was a blasphemous, unthinkable place, where with the satanic taste of neurotic virtuosi, we had assembled a universe of terror and decay to excite our jaded sensibilities. It was a secret room, far, far underground, where huge winged demons, carven of basalt and onyx, vomited from wide grinning mouths weird green and orange light, and hidden pneumatic pipes ruffled into kaleidoscopic dances of death, the lines of red charnel things, hand in hand woven in voluminous black hangings. Through these pipes came at will the odors our moods most craved, sometimes the scent of pale funeral lilies, sometimes the narcotic incense of imagined Eastern shrines of the kingly dead, and sometimes, how I shudder to recall it, the frightful, soul-upheaving stenches of the uncovered grave.
So they were getting into it.
I'd say they were really, really bored if they have to, resort to this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and this is at that time, this must have been some kind of high tech kind of stuff. They have pneumatic pipes pumping in the scent of the uncovered grave.
Right. And so at this point, where they're talking about their hangout, their hideout.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they set that up because I was like, wait, are they at this point? I got a little confused as I tend to do here at learning Lovecraft. I was kind of like, oh, wait, are they on an expedition here or are they describing where they hang out? So they literally have people, they're paying people to pipe in like funeral smells and like morbid,
it's pneumatic. So someone did have to build it. I don't think they go into it, but it's
like
pneumatics.
An automaton, like drone-y kind of like machine.
Pneumatic just means forced air.
Okay,
so they have a mechanism that's shooting these senses. I don't know how they're doing it.
But I'm assuming someone's upstairs. Like, all right, they want the.
They have no servants. There's nobody there. I hear you.
All right, so then there's some kind of mechanism.
Yes, they have a mechanism.
Yeah,
built for
them. Probably the braided pole that you would normally use to call your servants.
Right.
That's probably what's pumping in.
Exactly.
All of these odors, so to speak. And Jason, I at this point I just have to. We just got into sort of the description of the museum, but at this point I would love to give you a shout out about your amazing property design for the 2011 show and the remount at Necronomicon Providence and then at Capitol Fringe. I forgot to mention, that same summer I did end up bringing the Hound. Was lucky enough to be able to present it at up in Providence at Necronomicon, and it was great to have you in the audience. But what I really recall, what stands out to me, was the skull that you made and then displayed in a box that we actually had to we got to put on stage. And I remember before and after the show, people in the audience just like coming up and asking me, is that a real skull? Is that real? And I had to say, no, it's no. This was made from scratch by my property designer, Jason McKittrick.
I appreciate it. Yeah,
it was amazing. It was everything. The amulet, the actual Necronomicon was amazing. The Book of the Dead.
Yeah.
So I still think about that and smile. It's just amazing.
Little secret here, Greg. That was actually a skull that he dug up. There was no fabrication.
Okay, the truth comes out.
He's sneaky. This guy's a rascal.
By the way, I don't know you guys now. Okay.
No.
This is a mistake Zoom call. No, I have to give it back too. I mean, yeah, you having me come onto that production and do the props really kind of like, got me on a way of making Lovecraftian sculptures as like a side hustle that eventually turned into my full-time job. So I have to give you some credit for that. And also during the production, I don't know if you remember, we were sitting before one of the showings and me and Greg sat up in it was like a loft area. We came up with the name Cryptocurium. So Greg That's is at least half credit, maybe even more on that, because the two of us were sitting there trying to come up with a name and it just came out of somewhere.
Oh yeah.
I think that we were trying to. At that point, we were interested in doing a little bit more Edgar Allan Poe,
right?
And we were trying to figure out what to call it, and then Cryptocurium is a name for what you do for a living is absolutely perfect. So I'm glad that I could take some credit in that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's there because it was kind of like I was ready, I was primed, I just didn't have like the launch pad. And then you came along and said, hey, do you want to do the props for this? I was like, yes, absolutely. And it just went. So
and the rest is history.
The rest is history. And yeah, here we are. Now we're talking about it again.
With this lunatic.
Yeah, with this guy over here trying to read these stories. I was just about to say, because as you're listening to this, you're hearing Greg. He recorded these passages for us, and just in reading it now, I was brought back to when Greg was doing his performance of this particular passage, and you really get the idea of how ghoulish. I don't want to keep using the same word, but it's the perfect word for it. Their little museum must have been. You know what I mean? You think of like some of those, like you hear about those little museums in Europe that have like these old mummies in them, or old, it's like plague bodies that they dug up, or all these weird artifacts, and it all kind of like comes together, and you can imagine like, why hasn't anyone made this into a film yet? Like, where is the Hound? Because this scene would be amazing. And then B, yes, this is Poe, but like there's something about this scene that really, we've read all these previous stories. There's something very specifically Lovecraft about the way that he describes all these items together, because we do know our boy does like display cases with things behind glass.
It's true.
Back to the Nameless City. Do
you think that this museum was actually like just a description of like a room in Christopher Lee's house?
Well, yeah, I imagine that's it.
And I imagine him just like popping in to check in, and he's like, all right, and then just walks out. He doesn't
he's like, don't touch anything.
Yeah. He just pops in himself, looks around, he's like, it's still there, and
Yeah, when he needs to get a hit of pale funeral lilies, he comes down to the basement.
Exactly.
That's it. Excellent. So one day, the two of them they learn of or start discussing of this particular grave, which sparks this really profound interest in them. And it's this old grave in Holland, and it's a cemetery that holds the body of someone who was a ghoul just like them, 500 years previous. So, and they talk about this that he was possibly buried with or had stolen a quote potent thing from a mighty sepulcher.
An OG, an old ghoul.
Yes, he's like the first one.
Yeah.
And they kind of gear up. You can kind of hear it in the way that he's talking about it. They're like, oh, this is the one. This is all right. We're gonna go over to Holland. It's gonna be perfect. And Lovecraft goes on to describe like how much of this was like an artistic event for them whenever they found like the thing that they were gonna go do, right? He talks about like these excursions, and he even says, I'll pull a little bit from what Lovecraft says, that they went on these excursions in which they collected these unmentionable treasures, and they had to be artistically memorable events. And I really like that aspect of it. Where they said they were no vulgar ghouls. They are, but there were these certain conditions of mood, landscape, environment, weather, season, and moonlight. And this was it for them. Like, and if anything went wrong, they were like, nope, we got to do it again. Like, there was something really. I like the particulars of this. Like, they were so like what would you even call it? They were like dandy ghouls. You know, I don't even know like the
They really
word
were.
for these guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, they were aesthetes in
Yes.
the absolute sense of the word.
Right. But had reached the end of their like interest in things, so they had to come to the dark side of of all this kind of stuff. And then the talking about digging these things up and everything had to be perfect. You could tell that they were like, they'd probably be talking to each other, these boots with this shirt or these boots with this pants and this shirt. And he was like, has
He's
to be
like,
this with this because I'm wearing the purple.
Yeah, that one will reflect the moonlight.
Yeah.
Those shoes are reflecting moonlight. No.
Yeah, no, I said I'm wearing gray, and he was like, fine.
And you
Both-
wonder, what kind of, did it have to be a full moon? Was it, you really wonder sort of, you wonder about the specifics of the conditions that they can only, go on these tomb raiding trips, so to speak.
Right. I mean, you almost envision them as like Victorian hipsters because they'd probably be like, full moons are so played out. Let's go under the gibbous moon.
Yeah, there you go.
He's like, but
That's
waning or waxing, but waning or waxing. And then they're like, he's like, oh, we both have to wear our brass belt buckles, and it is, that little,
Yeah.
the hipster style,
Right.
some little quirk of a fashion that they have to. If we're going in, we have to have these the brass
Yeah.
belt buckles.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
To quote Hannibal Lecter, tedious, very tedious. So they travel to this old cemetery in Holland, and like I said, the thought of exhuming this final resting place of this former grave robber is it's irresistible to them. That and the fact that the body had been buried several centuries before, and it's also mentioned that they've never traveled this far to do one of these artistic outings. But when they come to the graveyard, and immediately they notice, for the first time in the story, they notice the distinct baying of a giant hound, which we'll grow accustomed to over the rest of the story. But they ignore it because it's all part of the mood. And they begin digging. It's not as hard as they thought it was going to be. They're I'm sure they're like this probably looks awesome. They're waiting on each movement. They're like, we look so cool. This is amazing. They finally hit the solid object in the ground, and they pull up. They unearth this elaborately made casket, and they open it. So, upon opening the casket, they see it's a skeleton. And it seems to have been like chewed up, right? There's the bones have been broken and shattered, and they get the idea that it looks like whoever had been attacked by a wild animal or something. But the whole skeleton is there. But then they notice what's hanging around the skeleton's neck, and we get this wonderful passage.
In the coffin lay an amulet of curious and exotic design, which had apparently been worn around the sleeper's neck. It was the oddly conventionalized figure of a crouching winged hound, or sphinx, with a semi-canine face, and was exquisitely carved in antique oriental fashion from a small piece of green jade. The expression on its features was repellent in the extreme, savoring at once of death, bestiality, and malevolence. Around the base was an inscription in characters which neither St. John nor I could identify. And on the bottom, like a maker's seal, was graven a grotesque and formidable skull.
Ken, can we get the Wendigo riff for that, please? Yeah, I mean, any gravedigger, you come across that's it. I mean, they clutch the pearls immediately. They're like, we have to have that.
Yeah, the one thing that I will say too is like the progression of their addiction has gotten to the point where you're like, oh, an ancient ghoul? Like a guy, not ancient, sorry, but like an older one that like
centuried.
Yeah, century. They're like, oh, we're gonna have what he had. Like, we're gonna dig him up. Like we're better. Like that. That's the level of addiction they got to in their morbid, like just defiling the tomb of someone that they would eventually be.
Yeah, it's almost like the Highlander. Like if they get him, they get his kills under their belt.
Exactly, and they're like, and to their absolute like ecstasy.
Yeah.
It's got this amulet or medallion, and they're like, oh, we beat the best, or whatever. Like,
Yep.
It's just so wacky. It's like it's such a weird little thing to have written a story about.
And even though they see that the skeleton's been chewed on, and sort of aren't there like bits of clothing that are described as being tattered or something like that? Of course, they're not making any connection with the distant bang at this point. So it's yes.
The warning signs. The warning signs were there, but they're just like
they just ignore them. Yeah.
Oh, that weird, almost supernatural bang of a wolf, and this guy's torn to shreds with that cool looking amulet.
Yeah, no connection.
Why not? Why not?
Yep, and I think that this also calls out to Lovecraft's being drawn to these ancient sculptures, relief sculptures, depictions of monsters that can be found in these places. I mean, obviously, we didn't get to the story yet, but we'll read about this in the Call of Cthulhu. I know you're ready for that. And in this passage, right after, we also get a big first in Lovecraft stories. We get the first mention of the Necronomicon.
This is the first mention of the Necronomicon?
This is the first. This nameless city, remember, had the first mention of
the Mad Arab?
Yep, Abdul al-Hazred. But this is the actual first story that mentions Necronomicon by name.
Okay. Because maybe I'm just pulling from the readings that Greg has obviously done for us previously and hearing it. Because I'm like, okay, is that the first mention? But maybe
you're thinking of the festival because they mentioned the Necronomicon in the festival.
Right. Maybe I'm just
after this.
I'm just hearing Greg's voice in my head.
That's what it is.
That's what it is. All right. You live there rent free, buddy.
So obviously we have to have this read because this is a big moment in the Lovecraftian lore.
Alien it indeed was to all art and literature which sane and balanced readers know. But we recognized it as the thing hinted of in the forbidden Necronomicon of the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazred, the ghastly sole symbol of the corpse-eating cult of inaccessible Lang in Central Asia.
And there it is. I was going to go on a deep dive about the Necronomicon, but I'm not going to. I was going to do that, but I was like, you know what? Let's let this unfold with each story so you can learn about the Necronomicon like anyone else would if they read these stories in order. So, I mean, you're a horror movie fan, Ken, and you kind of have some idea what the Necronomicon is.
Yeah, it's Ash finds it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
We're definitely going to encounter the Necronomicon quite a bit. So there it is. It's put out there. It's a spooky book. It's kind of like one of those a spooky book. It's just a spooky book.
It's
you open it up,
it's just book.
It's just filled with spider webs and like the spider rings.
It makes you open it up, it makes the
yeah, exactly. It lights
from
up.
The 90s Halloween decoration.
More accurately, it's closer to something like a Grand Grimoire or some kind of evil book of magic or some kind of thing where you do the rites and the devil would appear. That's something along those lines.
Yeah.
So
I just wanted to sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to kind of I don't think I give Reed and St. John really enough credit. I mean, when they say what's the line when they say we weren't mere ghouls? Is that right?
Right. Yeah.
But they have all this background information on the Necronomicon.
Right.
So I mean, we got to give them some props. I mean, they've done their homework.
They certainly have, and they clearly, and it's at least alluded to that they have a copy, which is going forward as we read more. Ken, this is a rare book. There's maybe five or six copies in the whole world.
I gathered that.
Yeah, like if you ever seen, you ever see The Ninth Gate?
Yeah.
Kind of like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Is Johnny Depp in? No. Anyway,
he can be.
Yeah, but no. And also, as to what Greg was saying, like we're not mere ghouls. It's like, hey, we do have to give him credit because. The museum too, they're doing the work themselves. It's not just like they're not just digging and selling body parts, they're like they're in this for the love of the game. So it's like it's not to turn a buck, it's like no, they're after the rarest of the rare, wild, some like priest head from like some time, like you got to give them credit.
They're just trying to stave off their crippling ennui.
That's right. They absolutely They absolutely, are you ready? Have skin in the game.
Yeah,
There you go.
Zing!
Skin covered books, skin lamp, the lampshades made out of skin. That's the whole thing. They've got it all. Mummies, wall to wall, and
love it.
Yeah. So that's more or less the Necronomicon. So afterwards, they go through this amazing artistic experience. They get their door prize. And they leave the cemetery and they return home to England. And I think it's right away that, strange events really start to occur. They talk about these odd sounds that can be heard within and around the house. And that weird baying has kind of followed them to England.
My favorite part was when they were describing the lurking, maybe it was just an imagination of what was out the windows, maybe seeing this big figure. That was like, okay, we're in haunted house Lovecraft mode, where he gets into those kind of like the wrappings and like you're kind of like, oh, I'm in a creepy house and there's ghosts out here, and like the way he describes it from like outside the windows. I was like, yeah. I was reading, I was like, mm-hmm.
And of course, because it's from one like really creepy, setting to the next, like, what is this? Like the really abandoned or like bare, like British moors, like out there. It's just black with fog.
Yeah.
So
Dartmoor. It's actually
it's
actually Dartmoor, England. Yeah. It's,
gotcha.
The famous moors of Dartmoor. Yeah.
Yeah, which made famous by the Sherlock Holmes story. We know it's out there.
And also American Werewolf in London.
Right. Those moors have a lot of canine activity.
Yeah, Hounds of Baskerville and all that stuff. Yeah,
Man. Yeah.
I know a little.
Yeah. Hey. You made your link. Greg, I encourage Ken when he's reading these stories to call out that, hey, this reminds me of this horror movie, or this reminds me of this other thing I've seen before, because kind of I'm not gonna say the point, but like the soul of this whole thing is like, hey, you know what? H.P. Lovecraft probably made up most of this stuff that we're into in horror these days. And we even have a little saying every time we come across it, Howard beat you to it.
Yeah. And
that's right.
We're going to add a button on the wall that's going to have an alarm. And once we make the connection, we're going to slam the alarm.
Yep.
And it'll probably be harpsichord.
Harpsichord, exactly. Yeah, no mere, like,
bing,
can't be the air
bing,
horn.
Bing, ging, 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 ging,
Right.
ging.
Where have I heard that before?
Yeah. Oh, it's our thing.
Yeah.
Like the desktop buttons you could get at Staples. That was
Right.
Yeah, but it's going to be that harpsichord from our theme song.
Right.
Well, I mean, he is really. I mean, he is the granddaddy of so much.
Yeah.
That we've all inherited. I mean, John Carpenter, Stephen King. I mean, Lovecraft was a huge influence. And I loved John Carpenter's The Thing. Before I'd ever, just as a sidebar, before I had ever heard of H.P. Lovecraft, that was one of my favorite movies. I mean, I guess you could call it sort of. How would you describe that, guys? I mean, it's horror, but it's also sort of semi.
The Thing?
Yeah.
It's certainly cosmic horror. It's also body horror. It was
suspense. There's also a bit of almost like detective work. It's almost like I don't know what you would call it, but I'll tell you what, Greg, you point out anyone that says they don't like The Thing, I swear I'll punch them in the face right now. Like, if you find someone, you send me a message. I'll show up. I'll ring the doorbell.
Who say they didn't like The Thing?
If someone doesn't like The Thing, you call me. I go to them.
Will do.
Knuckle sandwich.
Ken from Philly.
Yeah, Ken from Philly shows up because The Thing is like.
It's the gold standard.
It's the gold standard.
It really is.
Yeah,
it really
it's
is.
so good. And
I'll put your number on speed dial. How about that?
There you go. You overhear him on a bus. Take a picture.
Honestly, Ken will punch somebody just if you want him to come down there for whatever.
If need be, I'll come down there for you. But
I think all those things definitely describe it. But I think there's another level to The Thing where Lovecraft, and we've been over this, wasn't so much interested in human, emotions, human problems. It was all about the cosmic for him and that how we were so insignificant. But John Carpenter's movie, it's all about the human emotions and what they're feeling and how paranoid they are. So I think because of that bringing us in because of all the paranoia. They don't know who it is. They don't know it's a big whodunit. I think that one, because he did it in that way, it really brought a lot of people into the story because it makes it personal, because it could just be anybody, and then this all of a sudden this horrific monster is right there.
If they wanted to turn it up one level higher to make it more Lovecraftian, it would have been the whole time Mac would have been narrating, and it'd be him in the mental institution talking about what happened out there at the lab.
Yeah, but
that would have pushed it. I'm saying that would have pushed it one more level, and he's about to flamethrow himself at the end,
It would have, but it would have taken away all the suspense, because then we would know for sure he survives every
exactly. I'm just saying, if this was like a Lovecraft adaptation of The Thing, that's how it would have went. Right. I love the movie. Don't touch the movie. It's perfect.
Right.
It's perfect. Don't touch it.
You hear that, John Carpenter?
Yeah. I've actually got a question for you. So, at what point, Jason, Ken, at what point did Lovecraft sort of move more into the cosmic horror genre and away from the classic horror, which is what the Hound is?
So we talked about it.
You feel this, because I can tell you what I think, but it's just,
I know for you was From Beyond, right?
Mm-hmm.
So From Beyond, and I think it's also a gradual process, because I think, like any artist, author, creative, I think it was a process for him to kind of get there. But certainly when you get to the story From Beyond, the cosmic is kind of like laid bare for him. You have these, there's that machine that's made, and it kind of takes away all like the, all the nonsense away, all the filters that we have in front of our eyes, and exposes to us this otherworldliness that's there, that's in the air, that we can't explain. We don't know what it's there for, and for the most part is indifferent to us.
Yeah, and the thing is, in From Beyond, in the story, when he flips the switch, he's quite literally flipping the switch in the story. But From Beyond walked so the music of Eric Zahn could run.
I was going to say, and then the music of Eric Zahn, that I remember the first time I read that story. I still remember it. I was
it was a couple months ago for me.
For you, yeah. I that was a later read for me. I didn't read that till I was in college, and I remember reading it the first time, and I was sitting by myself reading it, and I was like, this is like, it just, his descriptions just open this whole thing. You could feel, like, he talks about how the night was this moving blackness, and the way he describes it, it just gets in there in that way that only Lovecraft can. And he, yes, exactly like you said, it walked so this story could run. And it's the way that he has this it's through the, the deaf mute musician, where it's, the mute musician, where he it's explained through a different avenue. It's just sound.
Here's why Eric Zahn took it to a full new cosmic level. It was because within From Beyond, you had a machine.
Yeah.
Science got there.
Yeah.
In the music of Eric Zahn, it was the connection of man to that thing.
Yes.
And his own, vibrations that he was creating open to some creature. So at that point, I think it went full cosmic, in where you don't need science to attach it because it is there.
Right.
But finding this frequency in this music in Eric Zahn, at that point, it was like, okay, this is just here. It's not like, it's like, whereas in From Beyond, I forget his name, was like, do you see it? Like, he was
Crawford Tillinghast.
Crawford Tillinghast was all like, this machine that I made, did you see it? And he was all like wild from this, like, working and toiling with the science.
Yeah.
But then just the talent of Eric Zahn, whether it be he was fighting off the music beast of cosmic horror, or he was summoning it. They got there and he had to, like, keep it at bay. It was the connection to what's in us all that's already there.
Right.
Where it was like,
and I think that's actually a good point, because Lovecraft also does this a lot, where he'll attack things by a scientific character or through like an occult, like, type character. And I think he did the same thing there, where it was like, here's the science guy, but that who creates this machine to make these things fall away, so you could see these things. In Eric Zahn, he made him mute, so it was almost like he had to take something away from him to make his ability to hear like a little more. It was almost like his hearing was cosmic, and because of that, he could create these notes, and it just, there was something about him that he became a conduit too, because the guy in the story, I don't remember what we named him.
Yeah, Gil or something.
He if you want to know, folks, go back and listen, please.
That guy was a creep. Dude was a creep.
He was sitting outside of his bedroom.
Yeah.
He kind of bends space for him, because he's in proximity to Ericson
Yeah.
and his ability to like channel this stuff. Yeah.
That story kicks so much ass, dude.
It's a great story.
Ericson, but From Beyond, I loved.
Yeah.
I was like, yo,
Yeah.
yes, when I read that.
Yeah.
But Ericson was so cool because it was just that room. You picture that room.
Yeah.
And what that thing was that was coming.
Yeah.
Like, so that for me, it was the jump. It was the skip from Beyond to Ericson, and then
Yeah.
Ericson just like put it in there. You're like, what is this non-corporeal
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
that just exists that
Yeah.
you're gonna have to ponder about for a week?
Yeah.
And then you go, okay, no, it's just like a white see-through sheet that floats with like, you're like, whatever.
Yeah.
And that's for me. That's when the whole turn was, and it had nothing to do with Lord Dunsany and a falcon leading a ship into some weird land.
Hey, his dream stories have a purpose.
Sure, to get him to explain crazy monsters that we don't understand better.
It gives them all that florid language that we all love.
Sure.
So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it kind of does.
Just another one of our tangents that we go on here. At
Yeah.
Learning Lovecraft.
As you can see, Ken is taking well to the Lovecraft stuff.
Very nice to hear.
Yeah.
Look at us, huh? Who would have thought?
Okay, so we're back in England. Strange stuff is happening, right? They hear the distant baying once again, and now it's that they heard from the cemetery, and they talk a little bit about that. They've set up the jade amulet of the creature. It's in this little niche in their museum, and they burn scented candles and incense in front of it, which is hysterical because they don't believe. They're just like, this is awesome. This needs. We have to give it a little thing. They're more involved in the the process and the ceremony of it, and they're just like, yes, that's what we need here.
And I'd like to think that would be something that we would do if we got really into something. We're like, we know it's silly, but
yeah, you got to do it.
Let's burn some incense. Let's
as perhaps a way to maybe hedge your bets.
Yeah. Like, see, no, we respect it. Look, it's up on the thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, but like, how many times did you say fuck when you were doing?
Yeah, exactly. Animals.
Yeah.
And then and this is where he mentions that they had read much from Alhazred's Necronomicon, and about its properties and about the relation of ghouls' souls to the objects it symbolized, which is interesting. And then he says that we were disturbed by what we read, and then we get this beautiful little line: "Then terror came." It's wonderful.
That's when the proverbial shit hits the fan.
Exactly.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Exactly.
From now on, anytime something if we're watching a Phil's game and then terror came. Yeah. We have to earmark that and use that in our everyday lives.
I think it should be used quite. It should make it a new TikTok trend. I don't know.
No, I'd like to see a desktop button that says.
Then terror came.
That's what I'd like to do.
Yeah. And when you do it, it just shuts down your whole computer. That's what it's there to do.
Sorry, I couldn't finish that last night.
Why? Well, the blue
terror
screen
came.
of death.
Yeah.
And then terror came. That's the gold in anything. Like he has these big and small, like I was saying about what's the next one we read? Sorry. The fear.
The lurking fear.
The lurking fear.
Mm-hmm.
I won't go too much of that, but there's he'll do a paragraph of this describing fear of it's deep within you. You don't even understand it, but it's just ancestral. Or he has a way of putting it this plainly, and it's the same thing. And I love that. I just want to throw that out there.
So 4 days later, while they're both in their hidden museum doing whatever they were doing, they hear a low, cautious scratching at one of the doors in their secret library, which, if you have, they described it. They're in this manor. This is a couple levels below. Nobody's out there. They have no servants, and they hear a scratching as if a dog or something is at the door.
Yeah, and all the while they found a way to make green lights come out of gargoyles' mouths. They
were ahead of their time.
Yeah.
So when this happens, they're really, obviously they're scared because of that. But then also, if it's a person, they cannot be found with all this shit.
Yeah.
This is it.
Burn it.
So they put out all the lights, and they go to the door and they throw it open, and there's just a rush of air right? And then they hear this this rustling. I think he calls it like tittering, and like a kind of like an articulate chatter, right? And at that point they start to question their sanity, and then they only realize that it must be real because they hear this chatter and they can tell that it's speaking in Dutch.
Creepy.
Yeah. Very.
The Dutch are creepy. I agree.
At that point, I think they know they're in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, they may have awoken some kind of angry, shambling corpse or something.
Yeah. Or something.
And it probably wears clogs. So, oof.
They could hear it clumping down the hall.
Yeah. Right. There's a trail of tulips.
The wooden shoes.
Yeah. That's the teetering or whatever the sound is that he's describing.
Clogs. That's it.
Yeah. You're like, oh no, it's the Dutch.
Yeah. Oh no, it's the Dutch. Yeah. So one night, while he's walking home from a distant railway station, St. John is violently attacked and killed by a mysterious creature. The narrator comes to him before he dies, and St. John says to him in kind of broken speech that the amulet, that damn thing. And then he collapses, and I think Lovecraft calls him an inert mass of flesh. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, we know what's going on reading this story that we know they're fucked. But we get to this point, and it's like, yeah, it's you guys have the amulet, And I'm surprised there's not like a waiting list of like evil creatures trying to kill these guys from all the stuff that they've robbed. Like, this is the only one that had like some kind of creature attached to it.
Well, here's the deal. No, there probably is a bunch, but all the other stuff they just lucked into everything kind of offsetting, because it's like, okay, all these heads of different composition, they're spectral phantoms want to attack, but the holy man mummy over there, the eminence over there is blocking it from this over here.
That's actually, it's on purpose. They're so well read that they're like, no, we're good. It's all.
They're like, our green light gargoyles are warding off all of that stuff is almost like a proton shield. I think that they know what they're doing until this amulet.
Right. This is some kind of like Victorian failsafe.
Yeah. Right. Greg's like, these guys.
No, I mean, I just love that the last line of that paragraph. Then he collapsed, an inert mass of mangled flesh. I mean, what a description. I mean, you just can't top it.
But you get it, right? Because you're like,
totally.
Oh man, was he cut to ribbons, or was he just like crushed up like the skeleton, or was he just, it's, you don't need to know. It's just like, ugh.
At this point, I'm figuring that like almost all his bones and like his arms are kind of broken. His one leg maybe survived, and the other's kind of broken. So he's
twisted all the way back.
Yeah, he's like torn to ribbons. The one leg kind of got him there, and then when he just collapsed, it all just kind of gave in.
Yeah.
To like a pile of John Goodman. You know what I mean? Like
nice. So this is it for our pal Reed. After this happens, he's put into a complete panic. I mean, he already was descending into madness, but this is the breaking point for him. He destroys the Macabre Museum, which must have been heartbreaking because all that stuff down there. Because you imagine this is probably years. I mean, how long do you think they were doing this for? Decades, even. I mean,
dude, it's like when I had to like get rid of my bar. Like I know
exactly the same thing.
It's literally the same thing.
Somebody. It occurs to me. Somebody mentioned that they didn't do it for money. That this was a prestige. That this was a they did it. It was a passion of theirs.
Right.
But I can't help but believe that they were able to buy this old abandoned mansion, with the maybe with some of the money that they had made from selling some of this loot,
Sure. And you can kind of almost imagine too, because if it's like one of these old manors, like maybe it had an old crypt down there that was already creepy to begin with, and it already had these carved gargoyles and already had this weird stuff, and they're like, you know what, we should turn this into a weird museum. He's like, that's a capital idea, and they just they went
capital,
for it.
And I can't think of a better, in terms of setting, this story.
Yeah,
I can't think of a better place than the moors.
Oh, it's perfect
in England. I mean, Jason, are you aware? I mean, obviously there are a number of similarities between this story and Arthur Conan Doyle's The Hound of the Baskervilles, there's actually a passage that I'd like to read.
Sure.
But was there any kind of correspondence? Because Lovecraft died in 1937, right? And is there any evidence that they were in contact? Are there any surviving letters or any kind of other correspondence?
From what I understand, there was never any correspondence between the two. And in any research that I have done, I haven't seen any connection made between the two. From what I understand, there are old stories about these like ancient Celtic stories of hounds haunting the moors. So if those already existed, maybe
they
Lovecraft,
did. Okay.
Yeah. So if those already existed, maybe Lovecraft didn't really have to shout out Arthur Conan Doyle.
There is a rumor though that when H.P. Lovecraft died, he said, "Long live Sir Arthur Conan Doyle," and when he died, he said, "Long live H.P. Lovecraft."
Oh yeah.
So I don't know.
I think that was Jefferson and Adams. I think you.
I don't think so. I don't think that's.
Okay. It seems that, this story I feel is such an homage to Hound of the Baskervilles, and again, I'm quoting from Les Klinger's terrific annotated Lovecraft. This is in this is one of the citations, one of the in the marginalia here. He says, such tales have a long history in many countries. Arthur Conan Doyle's The Hound of the Baskervilles, written in 1902, hailed by many as the greatest mystery of the 20th century, tells the death of Hugo Baskerville, a man of ill repute who hunted a local girl for sport by the ravages of a spectral hound. And then it actually quotes from Hound of the Baskervilles, "Mr. Holmes, they were the footprints of a gigantic hound," end quote. So I can't imagine that. And then it goes on to say there are other stories, the Hounds of Hell. And it kind of wraps up by saying, obviously there are a number of similarities between the two tales, and there's no doubt that Lovecraft was very familiar with Doyle's masterworks. So
I'm sure he was. And if you were thinking from Lovecraft's perspective, he's just this guy who's writing, in his room. He's not this accomplished writer. We know he doesn't view himself that way at this point or at any point. So him kind of maybe being tangentially kind of like inspired by the story, I'm sure that he probably was, but I don't think it's something that we could even jeer him for, because those old hellhound stories, particularly there's I think it's called the Black Shuck, which is this it's an old English story about this hellhound that roams the moors. If that already exists, you can't really be like, all right, well, he's taking from Arthur Conan Doyle's idea that there was this hound on the moors. If that was the case, I think more people would have said something by now. They're like, hey, he just read this story, and then they gave him his version. And even if he did that, so what? But I don't think we're at that. I don't think we're in that position now.
Well, but if you're writing a song, or you're writing a story, or if you're making any form of art and you like it, I mean, one's gonna inform the other.
Oh yeah, I think that's fine.
What I'm saying is, I'm just sure it's like, I'm writing this story. Oh, I like this one. My idea is kind of surrounded by this. You take from it, and then you make it, your own, different. So, like, I'm nobody, but I just think it was probably just like, here's how I would have done that,
Yeah, no, that's all well and good, and I think that could have been the case. But I think all I'm saying is that because there are already existing stories of black, it doesn't even need to be black, but there's these hounds.
The lore already existed.
Right. Yeah. The lore already exists, so I don't think it's anything like egregious, because it already exists in a form. So I think maybe he was even playing to his audience a little bit. He's like, hey, we're in this, this Poe. We're also in this, there's certainly some of that was in some of the Sherlock Holmes stories. Some of these things that had more like Scooby-Doo endings, but
well,
they were.
Let's just say Sir Arthur Conan Doyle doesn't have a monopoly on hounds.
All right.
That's true.
He doesn't own the spectral hound.
Okay. Sound like you're mad about it.
Because this guy for you. No.
Fair enough. No, great point, Greg. There are certainly similarities. And hey, maybe he, like Ken said, maybe he read it one day. He's like, you know what? I think I could do better. Maybe.
Well, the fact that he was also a rabid Anglophile. He really thought of himself more as English than American.
Oh yeah.
And that's I mean, there are even, there are anglicized spellings of certain words in a lot of his stories,
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if there had ever been any kind of, correspondence or letters between them.
If there was, I guess it didn't survive. I mean, they're kind of like, they have like what, 1 degree of separation, because Lovecraft worked with Harry Houdini for the one story, the Imprisoned with the Pharaohs, and we know that Houdini had a relationship with Arthur Conan Doyle.
That's right.
So there's at least 1 degree of separation. So I mean, if they ever did had correspondence, they don't survive. But interesting take.
It'd be you brought it up. It'd be funny if like Houdini was like, "Yo, it would be hilarious." He was like, "You should write your own version of the Hounds of Baskerville."
Yeah.
He's like, and do it completely different. He's like, 2 dudes dead.
It's actually funny, not to go too more of a tangent, but like Harry Houdini was friends with Arthur Conan Doyle, but Harry Houdini famous for his I would at least agnostic. I don't know if he was atheist, but he was tasked with breaking up all the spiritualists. He hated these gatherings with seances and all that. And he would go in and like break these things up. But Arthur Conan Doyle, who is responsible for possibly the most famous detective ever, was actually convinced by those like fairy photos from back in the 1800s. Yeah. It's so funny that it's like that guy who made
he was a noted and very proud spiritualist. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
I think it might be one of the one of the wedges that broke, because Houdini and Conan Doyle they'd been quite friendly, very, very good friends. And I think the spiritualism sort of, that might have been the rift.
I mean, because something like that, it's like, okay, are you sure you believe in all this stuff? But it's okay, because there's also a case to be made that actually more than a case to be made that Arthur Conan Doyle completely took the entire landscape and the entire skeleton of the story of Sherlock Holmes from Poe's Dupin stories. So maybe he's not so great. Anyway,
I'm tired of this guy having the Hound now.
All right. So after he destroys their museum, which must have been heartbreaking for him, because obviously these things had quite a bit of emotional resonance for him and his pal. He destroys the museum and then decides to flee to London. But that doesn't seem to help out, because he continues to be plagued by strange occurrences once again. And we get this one occurrence of the night where he says a black shape obscure one of the reflections of the lamp in the water. And then a wind stronger than the night wind rushed by. And he says, I knew that what had befallen St. John must soon befall me. So he can't escape it. I think, even though he destroyed the museum, I think he still has the Hound amulet, and he's like, no, let me just hold on to the one thing. Look, I got rid of all the other stuff. I'm fine. I'm not going to do it again. Yeah. Just let me keep this one piece. And he still hears the baying, and he sees this apparition of some kind of flying thing, and he knows that right there, he makes the decision, right? He's like, he has to travel back to Holland. He has to put the amulet back. And if he's gonna survive, because if he doesn't want to end up as whatever he said, an inert mass of flesh or whatever.
Dude, what a scene too. Thinking about that.
Yeah.
Like, after everything that's happened and all that you've done to like get rid of your museum, you had this thing kind of haunting you. You watched your buddy just in front of you. Going.
How many times can he say sorry?
Yeah.
and you're going back to this, moonlit tomb where you this
back to the scene of the crime.
Exactly. And then imagine the shivering walking up to that, probably sweating bullets. It's probably cold.
Yeah. Doesn't even have his buddy.
Yeah. It's just him,
And I think it's pretty safe to assume at that point he starts packing heat.
Yeah, probably.
Yes, he does.
No spoilers.
Right. we know from the one-man adaptation that there's definitely a gun involved. So he travels to Holland, and before he can get to where he's going, he stays at this inn in Rotterdam, and it gets stolen. It's like what a comedy of errors thing to put in there. It's like somebody stole it. It's kind of it's such a strange like way that he kind of puts this together. And this is my only stumbling stone in this story, where like the next day there's already a newspaper article about the night before about how a band of thieves were savagely slaughtered by some unknown creature.
Right.
And it's like, okay.
But you know what? Sticky fingers on the Dutch. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's the thing, you know?
This whole story is just about not to trust the Dutch. Is that what you're saying?
Well, you know what? You would imagine that the band of thieves would have been easily detected with the clopping going on.
Right. And the trail of tulips behind them.
Yeah.
Right.
I wanted to show this off. I know that our listeners can't see it, obviously, but you recall that?
Oh, yeah.
That's the original one I did, yeah. Yeah, it's the original sculpture I made for Greg.
Behold the amulet.
Yeah, the Hound amulet. It's made out of super sculpty clay, and then I painted it and lacquered it and put a gold chain on it to have it look like the at least how it's described in the story.
Don't believe the lies, Greg. He went to Holland.
I still have the other one, but it's in my box of props, so I don't have it in the apartment. But this I keep on my bookshelf under my annotated Lovecraft and right. Along with a few other things.
That's awesome.
I'm honored.
I like that. I like that about you guys. I'm a fan of that.
No, it was really fun to make all that stuff.
I keep all the stuff Jay stole from corpses. I have that all around my computer setup.
We're live.
Too.
We're live.
No. I have the artwork. The artwork that wink, 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 that Jason has made that he gives to me. I treasure it as well.
Mm-hmm. So we get this next passage.
The baying was loud that evening, and in the morning I read of a nameless deed in the vilest quarter of the city. The rabble were in terror, for upon an evil tenement had fallen a red death beyond the foulest previous crime of the neighborhood. In a squalid thieves' den, an entire family had been torn to shreds by an unknown thing which left no trace. And those around had heard all night, above the usual clamor of drunken voices, a faint, deep, insistent note, as of a gigantic hound.
So at this point, he's still going down to the descent into madness is clear. We're going at a clip here. He returns to the churchyard finally, and begins to exhume the coffin of the old ghoul, whatever you want to call him, the OG. Legendary ghoul.
The OG
ghoul. The what?
OG.
The OG ghoul.
Original ghoul.
For some reason has to smack for some reason he has to smack a vulture with a shovel because a vulture just shows up. I love that little detail.
Yeah.
He gets down to the coffin, undoes it, and then he finds the skeleton within. Strangely, it's embraced by a clutch of bats, but it's covered in caked blood and bits of flesh and hair, and then it's holding the lost amulet in its hand.
Yes.
Amazing.
No longer hanging around its neck.
No. And suddenly the skeleton begins howling. And it's this same howling / baying, the word he uses, that had been tormenting him since he first stole this amulet, the first night that they heard it. It's amazing. The narrator, Reed, flees the graveyard, succumbing to madness and despair. I believe he breaks into laughter, I believe.
Yes.
Maniacal laughter.
Maniacal. He states that he intends to kill himself with the revolver, believing death is going to be his only refuge from this horror that has kind of engulfed him. And we get this final passage of the story here. We'll have Greg take us out on this passage.
Madness rides the star wind. Claws and teeth sharpened on centuries of corpses, dripping death astride a bacchanal of bats from nigh black ruins of buried temples of Belial. Now, as the baying of that dead, fleshless monstrosity grows louder and louder, and the stealthy whirring and flapping of those accursed web wings circles closer and closer, I shall seek with my revolver the oblivion which is my only refuge from the unnamed and unnameable.
Is that one sentence?
Gunshot.
Yep, there it is. Yeah. And ends with the gunshot.
So, I mean, for me, the $64,000 question is the Hound this skeleton that? I mean, does the skeleton take on qualities of whatever this Hound spirit is, or is the Hound a separate spectral entity?
It's actually funny that you bring it up, because that's something I've always kind of puzzled over about the description of this creature. Because most of the time when you see
the skeleton starts to howl, right?
Right. So exactly, like, is it a reanimated skeleton? Does, like, when it decides to go out and do its evil deeds, does it become this thing? But the skeleton is in there. So in one of the previous passages, it says that they read in the Necronomicon about its properties, this carven thing, and about the relation of ghouls' souls to the objects it's symbolized. Is that what he's talking about? That this amulet kind of gives them these powers in some way?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's a good question.
And then also another thing that I kind of puzzled over a little bit, the bats. All right. So when they first uncover the grave, when they're leaving, Reed looks back and sees that the bats descend into the grave, right? And then when they come back later, right here towards the end, the creature is described as being covered in bats in the coffin, right? And then a few times in the story, when they're describing when someone kind of sees this thing, it's not a particular form. It's cloudy almost, or smoky.
That's
so
right.
Is this thing traveling around as this cursed skeleton in a cloud of bats? Like, that's scarier than a hound creature.
I mean, your guess is as good as mine,
right.
but I
Ken
think
has
that's
a thought.
Very good theory.
Here's my take.
Okay.
So the skeleton never left the ground, right? So you disrupted the peace, let's say, of this old ghoul. This amulet that has been taken from him now has awoken the magic or whatever. So once it's gone, those bats, they go in.
Yeah.
Now starts a gestation period of this kind of thing. I think it's all more supernatural.
It's a spiritual creature that's summoned.
Spiritual creature that comes, but with each kill, it starts to regenerate the body, because the clumps of flesh and everything, I took that as more of like it's coming back, it's growing.
Interesting.
As opposed to, like, think of like Imhotep.
Yeah.
From, the mummy, British.
Yeah.
But like how the more souls, it more regenerates.
Okay.
So as opposed to it being like the flesh of the people it's killed.
Okay.
I was kind of taking that as like the bats almost come and form like a protective cocoon.
Okay.
Because the magic isn't there now to protect, but the spirit brought back the amulet, the spirit of the Hound.
Okay. It's through supernatural means, so it's like
Yes.
it just gets back there. It's not going to disturb the dirt. It just gets back in there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm taking this as like, and it howling is kind of showing that the spirit is it. It's like it's one of the same that goes with. He was the original ghoul that.
Okay.
Spirit was imprinted on the amulet that it had.
Okay.
So maybe he had like a bat amulet somewhere that we don't know about. No, but
okay.
But no, just the magic or whatever that's associated with that that amulet. He's kind of like now the protector of the amulet, buried with it, and these people that steal it from it, they're maybe they need to be buried with it to take its powers. I don't know.
Interesting. No, I like it. But I would change a little bit there. That I think this thing is there to protect him, the original ghoul.
Yeah.
Because he knows that people come and dig people up because it's what he used to do.
Okay.
So he has this protective amulet that if you mess with his corpse, this whatever this creature is that comes from the plateau of Lang, wherever that is, we'll get to that later. It comes and it hounds. That's where we get the name of this. It hounds whoever disturbs his grave. So whether he himself, this skeleton, is coming out, it's almost irrelevant. It's just that if you disturb his grave because this amulet is there, you're fucked. And the fact that they take it is even worse, because it doesn't matter, because it's like they said in that passage that I read, that like their soul is kind of like it's like linked to the soul in some kind of way. So
my personal take on the amulet, and the reason why Reed is I should say continues to be hounded, why he can't escape this thing, is because I think we have to assume that the ghoul in the Dutch churchyard is also he's a tomb raider. I think we can assume that he stole it from whatever shrine existed, you know, in this in Central Asia. You know, the inaccessible cult of Lang. So that's just always been my take, and that it's like the curse just gets handed down. You know, until the amulet is returned to the place of its origin in Central Asia. No matter who comes in contact with it, you're doomed.
Right, so it's resting in that grave for now, and the next poor sap that comes and disturbs it, he gets the curse next.
He gets to pay it. He gets to pay it forward.
Yeah. There it is. Yeah, I like that. We have it some here. It's, between the three of us, I think we have the idea, but once again, we're back to this thing where it's not fully explained, and that's what makes it fun.
Exactly.
Because then here we are, 100 years later, discussing this story, what Lovecraft meant.
Yeah, right. On purpose.
On purpose.
On purpose.
So, something like that.
Now, before we move on, Greg, we do this one thing where we try to cast who would play the characters in the story. So you have Reed, the unknown. Let's say Greg Oliver Bodine.
Greg is Reed. No one else is allowed to be Reed.
So you get St. Who would you cast as St. John? And don't say Chris Lloyd, because I always say Chris Lloyd.
I would I would have to cast Daniel Day-Lewis.
All right. Perfect.
All right. Yeah.
And he would go live in his own little museum for like 2 years just to get the roll down. He would go dig up corpses.
Yeah, he'd build the museum.
Yeah. Okay.
And the only reason why I say Daniel Day-Lewis is that I mean, my God, the guy's a chameleon, right? He's an actor. Yeah. But I'm thinking back to performance. He had not a huge part in I think it was Howard's End.
Okay.
Which he played a dandy.
Oh, okay.
And I'm also go back and watch the movie.
I'm gonna have to go look for that.
He's hilarious, actually, because he's such a fop.
Yeah, that's funny.
And of course, you know, he I think, you know, Martin Scorsese's Age of Innocence, but that small cameo that he had in Howard's End, just immediately made me think of him. So
yeah, no, I mean, the guy's amazing, and also that would put you in the film with Daniel Day-Lewis, and then you're up there. That's it. We'll see you at the Oscars next year.
Right. Yeah.
That'd be amazing. Who do you think?
I'd like to thank the Academy and Daniel Day-Lewis.
Who do I think?
Yeah, who do you think?
Christopher Lloyd. Now, who is his buddy?
171. Take a once.
Yeah. Yes.
Same hair.
I just wish. Yeah, I wish everyone. You might want to go first because I'm mulling mine out.
Okay.
I'm getting there. You go first.
So, because of how, to steal Greg's term that he said a few moments before, because of how foppish he is in the film, I would go with Tom Cruise, a la how he portrayed Lestat. Yeah. I think that'd be because he's got that like air of like aristocracy about him, and then he would have like, you know. Wait till he's dead. We'll just rob his tomb. Like I could just totally see that guy as that. And then, you know, fast forward to an hour and a half into the film, and he's just a pile of flesh. Because I would like to see that.
It's good.
Tom, we're gonna have to cut you into pieces. You want to do your own stunt for this? Absolutely. And then he just cuts him. He just gets cut.
That's right.
Man.
Come on, Ken.
It's gonna be weird because I'm not like.
Do it.
Jim Carrey.
I can see that. I can
see that. Absolutely, yeah.
I would like to see someone with an eccentric comedic take.
Yeah.
Be like that silly fop kind of like.
Yeah.
Like, you know, aristocrat, but also when it comes to getting torn to pieces and the fear, like really overdoing it.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to the death, you could just see him do that like.
Yeah.
Like fall into pieces.
I like it.
I was just trying to mull out my comedic character.
There's no wrong answers here, but I like that.
I think that might work.
I think it would work too. I think all three of them would be great.
Yeah.
And Greg, the difference of your guys' temperament, I think, would work really well. In this.
How does Greg play off of each of these guys, and you know, what kind of performances do we have in the end? I like them all.
That remains to be seen, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
Till we make the movie.
There it is, yeah.
Yeah, all right. So
Coming soon.
Yeah, so we start filming in 2 months, Greg. I'll have a treatment for you in a couple weeks.
I mean, you don't have this script in your back pocket? Come on.
Dude, shut up.
I only have one request: the scent of pale funeral lilies coming into my trailer.
It'll be in your rider. Don't worry.
Yep. That'll be the premiere. It will recreate the museum. You know, the orange lights, the scent of lilies. It'll all be there. I'll
actually set up a tubing system where someone will just be fanning the a bunch of roadkill
the
with fucking
big bellows. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
just a fan, not even a bellow, just a fan.
We'll get Ryan to start collecting dead animals.
Yeah.
Next
we'll
week.
just have Ryan walk around.
You could have someone wafted in using a giant ostrich feather or something.
Yeah.
That'd
Perfect.
be cool. That's actually, you know what? That's more foppy. I like that.
Yep. All right. So I just wanted to pull in a little bit of a little background on the story before we wrap it up. A little inspiration on the story. From a letter from September 16th of 1922, Lovecraft talked about how he had toured the Flatbush Reformed Church in Brooklyn and had written to his friend Reinhard Kleiner about the visit. And Lovecraft said that around the old pile is a hoary churchyard with interments dating from around 1730 to the middle of the 19th century. From one of the crumbling gravestones, dated 1747, I chipped a small piece to carry away. It lies before me as I write, and ought to suggest some sort of horror story. I must place it beneath my pillow as I sleep. Who can say that thing might not come out of the centuried earth to exact vengeance for this desecrated tomb? And should it come, who can say what it might not resemble? So, a little bit of fact coming out of there to inform the story. I've never taken anything from a graveyard ever, or from any historic sites ever. I definitely don't have bottles of them on a shelf behind me, so I'm not afraid of that.
Yeah, we haven't stolen rocks from Eastern State
Penitentiary. Everybody has.
Yeah.
The fact that he put it under his pillow.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
I gotta tell you, that's a little.
All right, De Niro.
Yeah, even for me. Even for me, that's a little,
Is it? I think it's awesome.
Under your pillow.
Yeah. It's immersion. Just have your Yingling, all right?
I will enjoy my Yingling.
All right, then.
Without rocks under my pillow. Dude, if there's a fold in the sheet, I sleep bad. Like, I wake up, I'm like, oh, God.
So we're going to call you the Princess and the Pea from now on?
That could
Stamp
be
it.
me.
Stamped. It's
that
official.
Could be me.
That could be you. That could be a horror story in the making.
Look, you know what? Don't slight me, Jason.
All right, don't embarrass yourself in front of our guest, all right?
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, I mean, that's I'd say that's all that's fit to print about the Hound. All right, Greg. Well, thanks for joining us, Greg. Really appreciate you coming on the show. We wanted to have you on here for, God, at least since we started talking about the show. I was like, well, Hound, got to have Greg.
Yeah, well, the first episode, I was like, when's Greg joining the Zoom?
Yeah, I know. I mean, we talked about it right at the beginning. Anything you'd like to plug, Greg? New releases, appearances, crimes you're planning on committing? Anything?
Well, first, let me just say thank you to both of you. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely, brother.
Thanks so much for having me on. This has been a blast. Yeah, I actually do have something to plug.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I just heard back from the Capitol Fringe Festival this morning.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, my solo adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's The Call of Cthulhu has been accepted.
Whoa! Let's put some fanfare in there. There we go. Congratulations, sir. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
That's
5 performances in July, and
Wow.
started on the poster, and the script's in very, very good shape. My longtime collaborator, Delisa White, is going to be directing. So she directed me in The Hound.
Yeah.
Both times.
Yeah.
Really looking forward to that. So if you're in the DC area in July, I don't know what the venue is going to be yet, but you could hop onto my website for an update or find me on Facebook. And
I got the festival name for you. Cthulhu at the Capitol.
there you go.
Also,
Perfect.
if you're not in DC in July, fucking get there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm still keeping my fingers crossed for 1 or 2 performances in Providence, but that remains to be seen. So.
Yeah, and hopefully, we'll hear back about that soon, because if you folks don't know, we mentioned it previous episodes before. This year, this August is once again Necronomicon Providence. It's the premier Lovecraftian convention. Anyone who's into anything Lovecraftian, if you're a creator, creative artist, musician, actor, you try to get there. So you'll hear more news about that, I'm sure.
Any older projects you want to plug? Anything else you got out there that you might want to just send our listeners their way?
It's I'm finally just kind of getting back into the swing of things. Yeah, I did make a short film called Pennies.
Oh,
it's a 30-minute film in which I play the heavies. I play evil twin brothers. One's the bank president, one is the mayor of the town. And it's making the rounds along the short film festival circuit. And
wow, I've not heard of this.
It's a 30-minute film. We shot it in DC and also on the Eastern Shore.
Okay.
In a beautiful town in Maryland called Chestertown. So
where can we download this now? Can we view it now, or?
They actually have not released any screenings for the public, because then that would disqualify them for entering in these film festivals.
I was going to be like, I know what I'm watching tonight.
Yeah, no. I mean, they did actually. They were really nice. They had a cast and crew, a private screening for us. So I was able to everyone was able to see the sort of finished product. But no, it's making its rounds right now through all the different festivals. I think once they've done once the play's been submitted, once it's out there, they'll probably be able to post something to YouTube, and I will absolutely share that. I had a blast. It was a lot of fun. I shot it last summer.
Awesome, man.
Great,
love it.
And then I'd be remiss if we didn't mention it. Greg is also known for his adaptation of Charles Dickens' classic, The Christmas Carol. You've also done is it F. Marion Crawford, his 2 stories? What was it, The Upper Berth and The Screaming Skull?
Yes, that just got published. Actually, it's coming
excellent.
in May.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's called Dark Soundings,
right?
And it's two stories by F. Marion Crawford, The Screaming Skull and The Upper Berth.
Ken, you'd love them. He's dressed as like a captain in both in the one. You'd love it. Ken loves nautical horror.
In fact, I've got a script formatting deadline that I have to meet next weekend, so I'm sort of under the gun.
You were here slumming it with these clowns.
Yeah,
that's right. No.
Talk about an eldritch horror.
It comes out in May, and I'm pretty excited about that.
That's great.
Awesome, man. It's really been awesome to have you, Greg. I'm
Thank you both.
I'm a fan.
All right. Well, if you're joining us for the journey that we're going along, next time we're going to be reading The Lurking Fear, which another great one.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be continuing on the Eldritch path with us, make sure you read up. So when we come back next time, you'll see that happening. Our hiatus is over. We'll be back on track from here going forward. So for this episode of Learning Lovecraft, I've been Jason McKittrick,
and I've been Ken James,
and I'm Greg Oliver Bodine,
and we'll see you beyond the Wall of Sleep.